Okay, so you got a Ninja News Japan yesterday. You're getting another one today. The reason I'm doing this is the one from yesterday was just kind of like a roundup of the last time when I was away. And then today, I'm trying to get back on schedule. Now, I'm already looking at my schedule for the near future, and because I have doctor visits on my day off, I might miss a week here or there. So I'm doing my best to try to keep things consistent. So that's why you're getting one from yesterday, which was like kind of a news roundup of the last month and a half, and one today, which is last week's news. So this is current, because I think the whole point of a news show, even if you don't come here for the relevancy of the news, is that it should be relatively fresh. You could go back and listen to old Ninja News Japan's. The content is still, relevant, but the stories are old. And I think people want to hear new stories. Like the most important story of the day. The Azure Lane Kashino Oppai mousepad sold so well there is actually a silicone material shortage. This thing cost 49,500 yen. Azure Lane's an anime I actually have never seen before. I assume Kashino is the character whose face is on the mousepad, and then the oppai means boob. They put giant silicone breasts on the pad, and that's what your wrist rests on. I was surprised because 50,000 yen is a lot of money. Like, you're talking a PlayStation 5 money, and people are buying a mouse pad with fake boobies on it. Now, they're using silicone, so it's high quality. I'm not going to, dish on the quality of the actual product. It's just a weird thing for people to want. In total, they have sold 93,703,500 yens worth of these mouse pads. And there's still, a waiting list for more when they get more silicone. So if that's the kind of thing you're into, you best get in there early, because I didn't even think about it. I've seen these booby mouse pads before, and I thought, ew. But, if people want them, that's fine. I'm not going to judge too harshly. It's what you're into. You might buy it ironically as a joke. Not for 50,000 yen. This is the real first story of the day. And this is Japan. This symbolizes everything that is wrong with Japan as a country. And it's Olympig. Now let's actually get into sort of what I was thinking about when I heard this story. And it's about people come to Japan and they don't understand that as a culture, Japan is still very far behind other nations in some ways. And weirdly, one of the ways this shows up to me is comedy. They still have a lot of pair comedians, like a straight guy and a guy who makes the jokes. And they tell stories and they argue back and forth. That was a style of comedy in the 1930s and 40s in America. And it fell away because people wanted more sincere, more direct communication. I mean, stand-up comedians now are telling very honest, very real stories all the time. Sometimes they're not even funny because they're just talking about their life in a very open way. They got to throw some jokes in there, but you know what I mean. There is a lot of slapstick, which again is not gone, but is certainly fallen out of favor. You wouldn't call slapstick sort of the main style of comedy like it was in maybe the 60s. And a lot of the jokes are very simplistic. In my head, they're almost childlike. There are comedy competition shows, and my wife will watch them, and she will not laugh once. So what they do is they have like a style of comedy, like you have to do like mime, and then the guys have to come up with it on the fly, which is really hard, but no one laughs the whole time. And that's showing that, they're not actually prepared to do this properly. They don't have the skills to actually make the jokes that they're supposed to be able to make. There's another issue that you'll run into. And body shaming is not really a problem here. My personal experience. So female comedians, there's a whole gaggle of them that are literally famous because they're overweight and they make fun of that, or have other people make fun of them because they're overweight. That's kind of their main shtick. There are some comedians, there's a couple that were popular. I actually quite liked them, and they were basically at first popular because they were really tall and skinny and weird looking. But body shaming is not a thing. my experience in Japan, so of course, my weight has fluctuated like any human beings. I've had Japanese people walk up to me and just say directly to my face, "You've put on weight." I've had people walk up to me and go, "You've lost a lot of hair." And then they laugh. And to me, that was the weird part, because they've said something that's particularly hurtful if you're conscious of it. And I'm actually very conscious of my weight. My hair has never bothered me. If I want to make Japanese people laugh, I make fun of my own hairline, and they all think it's the funniest thing they've ever heard. And this to me is like the lowest hanging fruit. This is the easiest thing. It's like, hey, look, my hair's falling out. And they'll go, "Oh, you're getting older." That's funny because you'll die soon. I've had people walk up and actually rub my belly. And like, I don't like being touched, and they don't sort of understand what the problem is. They go, "Ooh, you've gained weight, ha ha ha." And they never compliment you if you lose weight, if you start looking better. So body shaming, again, you see this on TV all the time, and they're making fun of the fact that these people are overweight or they're big or whatever. And it's very confusing to the Western sensibility, because this is something that we've essentially done away with. Now, one of the worst things you can do is respond, which is quite actually entertaining to see. So I had someone walk up to me and say, "Wow, you've gained a lot of weight in the last year or something." And I just looked at them straight in the face and said, "Yeah, so have you." And they were shocked and offended. And it's ironic that they were shocked and offended. And they said, like, I said, "Well, what's the problem? You just told me I gained weight. I'm telling you the same thing. How is that a problem?" And they say, "Well, it's because I'm a woman." I'm like, well, equality means you get to shame me, I'm going to shame you. And I didn't even say anything directly. I just said, "Yes, so have you." I just agreed with them that we have gained weight together. That's something, if you ever come to Japan, if you have lost hair, you should be ready for kids to laugh at you and point. If you are a big person, you should be ready for comments. That is something that is going to happen, and it's hurtful. It's especially shocking the first time, because Japanese society in general, it's all very polite, it's all very reserved, it's all those cliche things that you've heard. That is all true, but there are these other bits, like gender equality and body shaming that I'm talking about. They haven't even been touched on properly, and that's how we get to today's story. And it actually sort of really matches with yesterday's thing with Mori, because my whole point was Mori, as his mentality was out of date. He was like, I think, if I remember correctly, like in his late 70s, early 80s. And I think he should not be in charge anymore. Now, the guy who did this, he's in his 60s, late 60s. He is in charge of the opening and closing ceremonies for the Olympics. The Olympics is a very big deal, and they're having a lot of trouble. And last year, he said, you know what would be a really good idea? We have this comedian, Naomi Watanabe, and she came onto the scene. She's a larger woman, and she was using that as part of her comedy. But she's actually demonstrated she has talent, and she is actually funny, and she can do a lot more things than just make jokes about the fact that she's overweight. She acknowledges it, though. She actually says, like, it's been a struggle for her. She understands people are going to tease her and taunt her and stuff. But she's basically incorporated that, gotten to a point where she's famous, where she doesn't have to rely on that as the joke anymore. This guy who's in charge, they got her and they said, okay, she's going to be part of the opening ceremony. She's very famous in Japan. She's actually trying to get into Western movies and stuff, so she might actually become famous in the West. She's a growing star. He's the chief creative director. And he says, hey, you know what would be a really good idea? Let's dress up Naomi Watanabe like a pig and call her Olympig. And the idea was to put her in pink and then lower her from the ceiling, I guess, like a floating pig. And she would represent the pigs of the Olympics. This was the part where it sort of isn't cohesive. Like, if you take away the body shaming aspect, what does a pig have to do with the Olympics is one of the questions I have. These are athletes. These are people who have like honed their bodies to the pinnacle. They are doing incredible feats that people like you or I are incapable of doing. And then why would you dress someone up like a pig to represent the Olympics? So this 66-year-old guy, his name's Sasaki, and he's really famous in Japan because he created one of the most popular advertising campaigns in the whole country, where Tommy Lee Jones is an alien studying Earth society and selling canned coffee. So he says to his team, you know what we'll do? We'll have her descend from the sky as Olympig during the opening ceremony. And it got immediate pushback, which actually shows that his team is clearly more aware than he is. One of the members said it's too awful to even consider, and the proposal was withdrawn. This was supposed to have happened last year, but it came out just recently. Sasaki tried to defend himself. He says, I tend to make a lot of bad puns, and this one just slipped out of my mouth. Now, that already causes me some concern statement-wise. It's because it just slipped out of your mouth was an entire concept from start to finish. We're going to dress her up like a pig. We're going to have her descend from the ceiling, from the sky, and we're going to call her Olympig. That doesn't just slip out of your mouth. That is a fully formed, formulated idea. I thought she would look charming as Olympig, dressed in a pink outfit with her tongue poking out, but I was immediately scolded by a male staff member, and I regret it. So I think that whole statement is bullshit. It didn't just slip out of his mouth. He thought about this for a long time. Yeah, maybe he did think she was charming, but it is, again, how does dressing her up like a pig with her tongue poking out represent the Olympics? How does that make the world come together, which is one of the ideals of the Olympic Games? So, of course, this gets out. That's not good enough. He is forced to apologize. While exchanging ideas for the opening ceremony, there were very inappropriate expressions in my ideas and remarks. And my eyes were immediately open to this when staff became angry. So, deeply ashamed, I apologized and withdrew my idea. I sincerely regret and apologize for my terribly insulting, irreparable suggestion. Which is a fair apology, but again, I think the underlying problem is these older guys still have this mode of thinking. And it's this mode of thinking that is actually holding back Japan in many ways, like the equality for women, body shaming, all these other issues that are coming up. And they're starting to sort of boil to the surface now. His staff, which I assume is all younger people than him, immediately knew this was a bad idea. Just like I did as soon as I saw the term Olympig. I knew it was a bad idea. I'm not even involved. I didn't need the rest of the concept. As soon as I saw the word Olympig, I was like, nah, this is not going to be good. Interestingly, Naomi Watanabe, she responded just like by making a general statement. It was interesting to me because she said, yes, I was actually contracted to do the Olympics last year, but when it was delayed, the contract actually technically ran out. So she wasn't even sure if she was still part of the opening ceremonies or not. So she heard about this in the media just like everyone else. And her statement, she actually made like a big statement on Instagram, but this is a short part. I truly hope from the bottom of my heart the world can become a joyous place where each person's individuality and ideas are respected and accepted by all. Except, the pig shit. So on the 22nd, that dude Sasaki, he quit, which is entirely appropriate because clearly he is not suited for the job. I was unable to find who his replacement is yet, but I'm interested to see if, just like Mori, if he's replaced by a far more sensible woman. In 1 week, I got a bunch of stories that were, again, like it came in a little wave of the similar stories. So the first one is a cop, and he gets it on with a sex worker. So he hires this girl. He goes to a love hotel. He's like, you know what? I kind of want to check this stuff out later. So he filmed it. She grabs him, and she turns him over to the police. And I'm wondering why he thought this was a good idea. Because he's a cop, and again, he should know better. I always hold cops to a slightly higher standard when it comes to crime, because they should know better. He said, I wanted to look at it later, which is, okay, I understand that that's the whole point of filming things like that, is so you can look at it later. I'm wondering if he couldn't have negotiated with her. She is a sex worker. She is doing this for her living. If you're willing to pay extra, maybe she would just let you film it. I mean, you might have to make some promises and stuff, but, this seems like the kind of thing that could be part of the package, is all I'm saying. He was arrested under the Minor Offenses Act. And this was interesting because of the next story. Not minor as in underage. She was 30. He's in like his 50s. It's a small offense. So he was arrested under the Minor Offenses Act for filming someone essentially without permission, even though they were engaged in sex acts, which is really interesting. The next story, a vice principal met with a sex worker, went to a love hotel. And he also wanted to film it, so he used a pen camera that was in his bag to film it. He mounted the pen in his bag and I guess put it on a table or something so he could film them going at it. She realized she's being filmed. She contacted the service she works with. So basically, this is like an out service thing. You call them, they send the lady to meet you, and then you go to a love hotel, and then you do your business. The employee waited for them to come out, and then he grabbed the principal and then turned him over to the police. But he was arrested under the public nuisance ordinance. So you have essentially the same crime, but they're being arrested for slightly different offenses under different regulations. So I'm interested to see how this plays out. Or is the cop being given a lighter thing than the vice principal? But I guess regardless, even if you've paid for sex, that doesn't mean you can just film it and not get in trouble. Other great ways to get arrested seems to involve knives. So there was a man having a fight with his wife, and the cops were called. And the man decided to slash the arm of the police officer with a knife, and he was arrested immediately, of course. The interesting part for me is he said, when he was arrested, I wanted to surprise the officer. And I guarantee that slashing someone with a knife is a great way to surprise them. It's also a great way to get prison time. A high school student, for some reason, goes to the police station. And he says he found a wallet. And the cop went to get sort of the lost and found documents, and they're going to fill it out. And the kid pulls a knife and aims it towards the police officer who's standing too far away to get stabbed. The cop pulls out his gun and he says, put the knife down, in which case the child does. And then he's promptly arrested. And I'm wondering what the kid thought was going to happen. This would be another one of those cases where I really want to interview the kid is, what was step 2 of this process? So you had a knife. You show it, you're not in a position of, to actually overwhelm the police officer. You show it to the cop, and then what happens next? Because he has a gun. These are cops in Japan. I mean, they have revolvers and stuff. But he has a gun, and all he has to do is take 2 steps back, pull his gun out, and shoot you. And that's it. He wins that confrontation. Kid clearly hadn't thought this through. I want to know what his goal was. Was he going to get something from the cop? Was he going to do something? Was he going to become king of the world? I would be interested in that part. He was arrested on violation of the sword and firearms control law and interfering with a police officer during his duties, or in the performance of his duties is the way they phrase it. Apparently, knives and cops don't mix. Another way to get arrested, since we're kind of on that, is an anti-mask guy went to pachinko. And he'd gone to pachinko multiple times and been told you have to wear a mask if you're going to come in. And he gets very upset every time. This time he just got extra upset. He just said, bring it on. So they said, you can't come in if you don't wear a mask. You cannot enter. You bring it on. He threw punches and kicks. So he actually punched and kicked 2 employees. And then he jumped on a motorcycle and rode away, which almost is cool. Beating people up and getting on your motorcycle and driving away. There's kind of like a bad boy image there. He was very quickly arrested because they have cameras outside. They had his license plate. And you're not allowed to go around punching and kicking people. So don't do that either. He was arrested for inflicting bodily harm. And it seems like, honestly, it'd be easier just to wear a mask. Even if you don't believe masks work and you don't like the masks. I mean, I know the anti-masking thing is pretty thin on the actual reasons behind their actual doing it. But I actually think it would be easier to wear a mask that's uncomfortable and you don't like than to get arrested for beating up some poor minimum wage employees at a pachinko parlor. An interesting side note about anime. We'll get into some anime stuff. I have been teaching English in Japan basically the whole time. And I, one time, was using a textbook, and I contacted the author, and I had a very interesting conversation with him because they don't sell these books to just Japan. They sell them internationally. So they have to be very aware of different cultures and what's acceptable. So in an English language textbook, you will almost never see a reference to pork. Because if you want to sell the book in the Middle East, you don't talk about pork. And I was like, I'd never thought about that. It's hard to realize that something isn't in a book. they'll talk about food. There's always chapters about food in these English language textbooks. I never realized they never talked about pork because they never talked about pork. You never see it and you never think about it. But then after he said it, I was like, actually, yes, we've never talked about pork in any of these books. You talk about lots of other foods from lots of other cultures. And he says he has a big list on his wall of just things you are not allowed to mention. One of the books that we used, different author, had a fatwa put on it. Now, I never found out why, and I actually bet it's like the pork thing, something really small like that. But that book, again, I don't think they were going out of their way to try to attack or hurt the author of the book, just that book wasn't going to be sold in the Middle East. Very recently, an Iranian leader has put a fatwa on animated characters. And it's because they have to wear the hijab. You have to wear a head covering. So the idea is, he said, look, you can imagine characters and what they look like with their heads uncovered. But if you're depicting the character because of the rules of Islam, they need to be depicted properly. If they're out in public, they have to be depicted with their head covered. So they have to be wearing the hijab. So they've actually put a fatwa on anime. Now, I don't know what that means. Just like the other one, I don't think they're going to go after anime creators or writers or companies or anything. I think they're just basically saying, if you're going to be a good person in this area of the world, you can't be watching anime. Or if you watch anime, you have to get it like, I guess censored isn't the right word, but altered so that they're actually wearing the proper head covering at the right time. And slightly related, this is kind of like nerd news. There was a mobile game called Uma Musume. Uma means horse. And it's basically, it's actually, Musume means daughter. So this is horse daughter. I almost downloaded it when it came out because it just seems so weird. So the characters are not horses. They're cute girls, and they have a tail and horse ears. That's it. You train them to become race horses, and then you race them and you win, and there's like gacha elements and stuff. Gacha is like random, it's monetization, stuff like that. This has been surprisingly popular. So there's been a ton of downloads. It's really big. It's one of those things. It's kind of phenomenal. It's not being done ironically. Like, I would have downloaded it ironically, played it for 2 days, and then like, I'm not paying money for any of this. I'm not going to do any of this. But in the month of March, the revenue for the company that makes Uma Musume is up 425%. And they are saying they have so far made 71 billion yen. I'm thinking my next endeavor is not going to be another podcast. It's actually going to be some lame mobile app with cute girls in it and tons of monetization, because apparently that is how you make money in Japan. Since we're talking about cute girls, I'm trying to make segues and links and stuff. I'm not very good at it. I can admit that. There was a girl from SKE48 named Juna Yamada. And she retired in like 2019, so she's like 21 when she quit the group. This is a AKB48 subgroup. It's actually in Nagoya, which is where I work. She said to people, I'm an investing expert. I've made thousands and thousands of dollars with my genius investing abilities. And she went on dating apps to meet dudes, and then she would meet dudes, and she claimed she was making 10 million yen a year. And so what happens, like, oh, we'll talk, but how about this? You come meet me. I'll give you some advice. You give me a little money, a little taste, and everyone's happy. One guy alone gave her 500,000 yen for this advice. And I'm betting it wasn't for the actual investing advice. I'm betting it was so he could meet her again in the hopes this actually turns into a romantic relationship. The suspected total, so that this is only one case is proven so far as to happen. The suspected total was 100 men with 58 million yen total taken from them. So that's like an average of like 500,000 yen per dude that she's actually getting. Some are going to be less, some are more. She admits to criminal misrepresentation, but actually she was kind of being put up to this like scheme was actually come up by some other guys. And they've all been arrested. So there's 3 people who have been arrested so far. There's her and essentially what would have been her crime manager in this case. But if you meet a relatively famous person on a dating app and they say they have investing advice, it's time to be suspicious. Okay, final bits of news. Just COVID stuff. It's not gone. They've lifted the state of emergency. That's actually caused a lot of people to panic because they're just waiting for another wave to hit Tokyo now that they've lifted the state of emergency. They've rolled out the vaccination. They've started vaccinating frontline workers, medical workers, and older people. They, of course, did a poll. 65.6% people think the COVID vaccination is too slow. It's not happening fast enough. 28% think it's going smoothly. They are intending to vaccinate people who are 65 and over by the end of June. So I was actually thinking about myself, of course, and my family. I'm going to be way down on that list. So I'm thinking June, July, August, probably September. And by that time, I actually might hit the point where it might not really be a thing anymore. This has also led to there aren't going to be any foreign spectators at the Olympics. That's been decided. Whether it stays or not is still up in the air because these things are changing constantly. But right now they're saying we're not going to have spectators at the Olympics, just athletes, maybe athletes' families, but that's about it. An interesting side note, talking about things not happening, this year there was essentially no flu season. They had below 100 cases, so they had only 98 cases for the first 7 days of February. And that is normally when flu is just hitting. Nationwide, they had less than 1,000. I think that's for the same week period. Last fall, it was 12,000. And usually, they have 100 to 200,000 cases to make the flu season. So the social distancing, the wearing a mask, the washing your hands, it hasn't protected everyone from COVID, but it absolutely has protected people from the flu. So next year, flu season, maybe stay away from people a little bit. Maybe wear a mask anyways. And at least we could beat the flu that way. The vaccine has started, and this has stoked some fears because they've done some significant reporting on anaphylaxis. So far, this is about a week old, so it might be a little more now. There have been 17 cases of anaphylactic shock of people who, when they get the vaccine. Only 7 of those 17 cases actually meet the global standard for anaphylactic shock. So they're actually, in a weird way, over-reporting. Again, I think this might be part of the sensationalization and stoking fear because that's actually how you get people to watch the news. Pfizer has had 204 cases of anaphylaxis per million. They've had 5 in the US and 18 in Britain. So that's, compared to Britain, it's actually on average, but they've done a lot less actual vaccinations here. So statistically, that's higher. But this was the part I was more interested in. People who get the vaccine, how do they feel? So 92.4% report a certain amount of pain. Now that's generalized like aches and pains and stuff. 21.3% report headaches, and 3.3% report a fever of 37.5 or above. So one of the other things I read was that these ailments go away in a day or two. So yeah, you're going to feel like crap. You're going to get the vaccine. You're going to feel like crap for a day or two. You're probably going to have some pain. You're going to have a headache and maybe a fever, but it'll go away really quickly. And you won't get COVID. So I think that is a trade-off. The anaphylactic shock, that is scary. But if you're in a proper medical center, they know how to take care of you and they should be prepared for it because it is the only thing they've talked about other than sort of the pain and headache. And again, those are just easily treatable. If you get the vaccine, don't do it out behind a building with a dumpster and some sketchy looking dude. Do it in a proper medical center and make sure they have staff on hand. But honestly, statistically speaking, you're just as likely to win the lottery. So if you haven't done that, I guess you're probably okay.
You can tweet questions or comments at Ninja News Japan or join the Facebook group. On Facebook, search for Ninja News Japan. Sexy out homies.